thanks to everyone who's watching us from all around the world. We love being able to do these events online. I miss seeing people in person a lot, but what's really special about these events is that we can reach people all over the place. And that's so exciting to me as an author. And I'm glad for everyone here. And, as Stephanie said earlier, I hope you will support Malaprops. I will hope you support your independent bookstores, because that's who's putting these on. That's how you get to see us. We're so grateful for their support as authors. So we're going to dive in, and I'm going to lead Brianna in a conversation about her new book. I just read it yesterday, you guys. It's so good. I think this is a book that is going to highly, highly appeal to all of those book talkers right now who love Adam Silvera's They Both Die at the End. There's an If I Stay vibe here for Gail Forman fans out there. I think it's going to appeal to people who liked my book, Anne and the French Kiss. It is so swoony, so romantic. I can't wait to talk about it. Brianna, would you like to first give a little summary about the book, and then we'll dive in?
Sure, yeah. Okay. I can't believe you just said all of those things. Fangirling. Right. So You and Me at the End of the World is about Hannah and Leo, who are two very different teenagers, and they wake up to find they're the last two people in their silent and empty city. And kind of as they adjust to that, this world with no parents, no school, no friends, they start to realize they can really be themselves instead of just playing the parts that other people expect of them. But not everything in the city is quite as it seems. So if they don't figure out what's going on, then some very bad things might happen. And yeah.
Perfect. Great job. It's so hard. I don't know if you found it difficult so far. So for everyone who's tuned in, this is her third book event, which is so exciting. And for me as an author, I still find it really difficult to summarize my own books. So you did a great job. Have you found that difficult? Is it like, you were a pro. It sounded like you had it like.
Well, I definitely wrote it down and, rehearsed it.
Yeah, you have to.
It's also like such a hard book to pitch. And I've always struggled with that because there is like a massive, twist. And I have to be really careful about what I say because I don't want to spoil it.
Yes. It's so funny you mentioned that because I'm definitely having that problem talking about my next book, where the book kind of changes into something else halfway through. And my editor and I were like, ooh, how much do we say? Like, what can we say? It's really, really hard when there's like a secret that you're kind of hiding. And yours is definitely like this secret. We don't know why they're in this apocalyptic situation. Okay. As an author, I am aware that it takes a really long time to go, once you sell a book, once you've written it and sold it, it takes a long time to go from that contract to the book actually being published, especially when you're a first-time author and you're not in your publisher's like system yet. Essentially, you kind of have to get your foot in the door, and then you get in line with all the other people. And once you're already in line, it happens a little faster. But because of that, I know that you had to have had this book completely written before this pandemic began.
Yeah.
So first question is, what was it like to have written this book where these characters are looking at the empty streets of Houston, and then to suddenly be in a situation where you yourself were looking at these empty streets?
Yeah, it was definitely locked in. I started writing it probably 5 years ago, and then it sold to Scholastic like maybe 3 months before any mention of the pandemic. So when all of that happened, I was kind of just doing some like minor edits on it. And to be honest, it was really scary because I was like, man, I like worked so hard to create this empty city. And I wanted it to be a place where readers could go and just imagine like a totally different way of life, a totally like quiet, the opposite of the world that we lived in in pre 2019. So I was like, has this, is this going to totally steal my thunder? But but I have heard like a lot of people are really like connecting with it because it does deal with themes of isolation and, coping mechanisms. So you get to go through this journey with Hannah and Leo, and they're kind of showing you what not to do or what does work to cope. So I think it might be giving it like a bit more accessibility in a way.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And I think it's also really useful to point out to anyone who's watching and who hasn't read it yet to not be afraid of this book. I think there might be, I think some readers really, really want to experience books about what they're going through. Like last year at the beginning of the pandemic, like Station 11 turned into a huge book again. And everyone was watching the Steven Soderbergh Contagion again. Like we want to read about and watch things that relate to our experience to help us process it. But then after a while, I think sometimes it can be like, ooh, enough. But for anyone who's still in that camp or who has reached that camp, I want to point out that this book is really unique and that there are these like magical elements to it. It's very firmly a romance, and they're in this world, and without giving it away, as we've been talking about, like they are able to make some very like kind of sweet and magical things happen. So it's not all doom and gloom. Like they're dealing with a very, very difficult and scary thing, but there's this like magical fizzing, sizzling romance happening, and then some interesting things happening on the periphery that are, kind of giving clues as to what might be going on. So I just wanted to throw that out there too for anyone who's like, oh, no more pandemic, please. It's not that at all, but it just ties into the world in such an interesting way. And yeah, so I have been really curious, like how you've been going through and like talking about it and promoting it, and has it been like that particular challenge? And you touched on that a little bit, but like, yeah, you were nervous, I would imagine. Like you said, like kind of stealing your thunder or whatever, but
yeah, I mean, I think I've had kind of enough time now to get over that initial like reaction, because I mean
yeah.
we've been in this for like a year.
Yes.
So yeah, and then like I haven't heard from any like early readers that it was too much and that they had to stop or anything. Like it's all been really like positive, I guess. So I feel a little bit better. Yeah, I'm not as worried as I was right at the beginning.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that, because I do think it is a really, really good book for right now specifically. And it's just wild that happened to you. Like you can never plan for an apocalypse. So there is a passage that I wanted to read aloud. I know we're not going to you're not going to read a sample to everyone, but it's just one paragraph that I found really, really interesting. So the main character, there are two, it's a dual protagonist in this book, Hannah and Leo. And Hannah is a ballerina who's excelled quite a bit and is about to go to the next level. And so I think and Leo is a musician. I think that's the only background you need for this passage. So it's creative stuff like writing songs and writing words seems so hard to get right. No one's there to tell you that you're messing up, to bark orders at you and show you how to do it correctly. With ballet, there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. At the academy, we're trained to look for faults in ourselves, hence the wall of mirrors, because when we know we know when we've done something wrong, because there are rules, some of which are hundreds of years old. Ballet is immeasurable. It's not nebulous and free like writing a song or writing a story. Okay, so at the beginning of this, Stephanie read out your bio, and in it, of course, that is a very juicy little tidbit that you have this ballet background as well, and that you're still working managing ballet companies. Is that right? So I'm really curious how um, so in your book, you've got this character who like dabbled a little bit in writing when she was younger, and then ballet has become her life. And throughout the book, she's kind of wrestling with these creative writing urges again. And I'm wondering how that compares to your own life, where the ballet and writing begin and end, and what it was like being, someone who is so trained and has these rights and wrongs, stepping into a different creative art that is a lot messier and less definitive.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm really just like the person on the headset, backstage doing stuff like that. I'm not like super important. I'm not managing the ballet, but in earlier drafts, Hannah was actually not a ballerina. And I added that later. And I think it was kind of fed by my subconscious of like being in the studio with dancers for like 40 hours a week. And it really fit really well. But there is definitely an element in me as well, starting out on this creative career that I, was not intending to approach. I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was little, I was like, I read everything and just would try to read under the dinner table and stuff. But I didn't really think that being a writer was possible. So I really like set along my little structured path of, I'm going to get this job and do this and whatever. And tapping into like my creative side has been a little bit scary, which Hannah deals with a lot in the book too. So there are like some similarities, but I am definitely not a dancer. So
Interesting. So you never had that in your background at all. It's just a job that you found yourself in. A very interesting, fascinating job, by the way. But
yeah.
So you weren't a dancer?
No. So in high school, I was in the theater group and I was so into it and I was very organized. So my theater director suggested that I become a stage manager, and I loved it. And I was like, this is the job for me. And I went to university to study that. And somewhere along the way, I think, most of the stage managers in my class work in, regional theaters and stuff.
Yeah.
But I just applied for an internship at a ballet and kind of found my niche, I guess. And ever since, that's kind of all I've been stage managing.
Wow, that is shocking because this book absolutely sounds like it was written by someone who understands, like, there's so much of it is about Hannah knowing her body and being so in tune with her muscles. And it really, really sounds like it came from someone who has done all of these things. I'm so impressed. I thought for sure 100% you were a dancer.
No, I mean, I did take one class in college to, help my stage management career so that I could understand like what they were doing and stuff. And like, I mean, I am not a good dancer, but like I have, done things. So I could kind of like tap into it and just imagine it. And then, yeah, but getting all of that into words is like a completely different talent, I guess.
Wow. Well, phenomenally done. I'm so impressed. um, okay, so speaking of your bio, there are a couple other tidbits that I would love to pull out of here. Originally from Texas, this book takes place in Houston. You grew up in Indonesia and Egypt, and now you live in England with your rock musician husband and your two daughters. So Leo is a rock musician. We've got Texas in here. We had the ballet connection.
No, I just threw everything into this.
I love that. And I think that's what so many of us do is it's kind of easy to learn. Well, it's not easy. It's a really hard job, but like it takes away one of the hard levels if you can write about some subjects that you have a little more intimacy with. So I know because we've been talking for the last few weeks over Instagram direct messages that you've already got your second book written as well. And we talked about it a little bit before this as well. And that like, maybe it's next year, maybe it's the year after that. But I'm so curious as writer to writer, what it was, the experience was like writing your second book and how much of yourself you put in there, or how much did you purposefully say like, okay, I'm going to try something else? Like what where was like the conscious decisions on with that second book? How was that?
Yeah, I actually feel like, I learned so much in the making of the first book, that it was nice to have that crutch of things I knew. And I didn't feel like I needed it as much for the next book. Like in my next book, it's dual point of view again. And the female character is a scientist. Like she's like a science genius, which I know absolutely nothing about. So there was like a lot of research. But like you can just find like little details to really like dig into that come across really well on the page, I think. So hopefully it will also feel as real as, Hannah being a dancer. And the male main character doesn't really have a specialty, so I didn't have to do a lot of research there. But yeah, it's definitely, it's less, you couldn't look at my bio and look at the book and know that it's me in the same way that you can with this book. There's like lots of new fabulous things in the next one.
Well, what about the setting? Because you had like I'm really fascinated by the part of your bio where you've lived all over the world, and I would love to know what it's like to grow up in these different countries and what it's like to go from one to the next. And B, did you choose one of those for your next location?
I didn't actually. So the next location is actually in a Pennsylvania coal mining town that has like
Oh, wow.
experienced a like revival, and like they've got a fancy new science facility now. So like you're kind of seeing the coal mining town disappear and make way for this new like kind of artsy, trendy sort of town. But other than my dad is from Pennsylvania, and I have maybe driven through it, but I haven't really been there or lived there. But yeah, it was tricky because, having grown up like moving around a lot, I don't really feel like I belong to any one place. And I did really worry, like, is this authentic? Like, is this going to come across like somebody who actually knows about this place? So I did stick with Houston, which is where I went to high school for the first book. And hopefully more research will help with the second one.
Well, it came across beautifully. Setting is one of my favorite things in a book. I write really setting heavy books, and my favorite books all are ones that have a really good grasp on it. And I thought you did it so well. And I would love to see more of your travels come into your future books too. Okay, so this is your first book. I would just love to talk about that experience for a little bit, especially for any aspiring writers who might be watching, anyone who might be in your position, like about to publish something. I would love to know what the last, 6 months of your life have been like, and what it feels like to debut, not only like all the regular firsts, but then, we do have this very weird situation on top of it. And just like, how are you doing? What have you done? What are you excited for in the future? Like, what's the experience been like for you?
Like, to be completely honest, like, I got, I signed the deal and then the pandemic hit. And like, I think part of me, even now, is still like, waiting for the email to say, sorry, we're going to cancel this because, the pandemic. So I think I've kind of been like holding my joy back a little bit, which is, I wish that I hadn't, but what can I do about that? I was just trying to like protect myself in case it fell through and in case something horrible happened. So that has been like, I think that's probably different than your typical debut experience. But that could also just be me, and other people might not be feeling that way as well. The last 6 months it's been really interesting. It's like a shift. You have to go into all of this like admin stuff for the book that's coming out. And I've found it really hard to like find time to be creative and just write. And I'll be in the car on a long drive and I'll be like, oh, I really want to write this other idea or just this little short story. And then you get home and you have emails to deal with, and it is hard to balance it all. And I'm really trying to figure out how to do all of that still. I'm still very new at all of it.
And what are you looking forward to when this ends? What are the milestones that that maybe this stepped in the way from? Are there like certain festivals you're hoping to do, or?
Yeah. So there's one coming up in Austin in October, and I'm fingers crossed maybe get to go to it. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, like just getting to go to bookish events, maybe meet some of the debut authors that I talk to like online and stuff now, because I've made some really amazing friends. And I just want to like go and hang out with them and then, sign books for people. I want, all of those amazing things. And the pandemic has kind of kept those back from us in a way. So
Yeah, it feels so desperately unfair, I think. Like, I think for authors like me who've been around for a little while, some of us are secretly like, and not so secretly, we're like, whoo, a little bit of a break. Like, we don't have to go anywhere. And then we watch what's happening with all of you. And it's like, oh, to finally be at that thing that you worked so hard for. And then you've got these barriers in front of you that none of us could have predicted. I think all of us just want for you so desperately badly to get to go out there. And I know it's coming and it's going to be wonderful. And I'm just so glad that my hope is that maybe because, publishers can't tour every author, there's just no budget for that. But my hope is that maybe this has at least allowed a lot of debut authors who maybe wouldn't have gotten to travel much. They've still gotten to do some events because before, bookstores like Malaprops were not doing online events. So I hope that there's been a little bit of trade-off there. And I love hearing that you and your fellow debut authors are still like talking and making friends. The authors who I'm closest with today are definitely the ones that I debuted with. And like, we went through all of the different like phases of writing together.
yeah.
And like, no one else can understand what you go through. And yours is going to be like very, very specifically unique again, on top of everything. So I'm so glad that you've got that community going. So what have you learned so far? What advice would you give to someone who's maybe a few months behind you, or like maybe a year or two behind you? Like, what very specifically, what has surprised you? It can be anything really specific or much more broad.
Interesting. I don't know. Like, I feel like I've spent a lot of time trying to like join social media and like be present on there. And the jury is still out whether I did too much of that. I'm kind of personally feeling like I maybe did too much of that because I'm feeling a bit burnt out. But I mean, there is like, you have to find your balance and kind of, figure out what you're willing to put into it before it starts like eating into the writing and stuff. So yeah, that would be my advice for people who are like 3 or 6 months behind me. Then I don't know, do you want like my biggest piece of writing advice for
Yeah,
even,
absolutely.
like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for that one, I always say like, don't be afraid to like rewrite things. I feel like a lot of people like write a first draft, and if it's not kind of getting anywhere, they like kind of give up on it or just do like some change, like surface level changes. So something about You and Me at the End of the World is that like I did rewrite it completely from scratch after having a whole draft there, and it was
Wow.
like the best thing that I ever did. So
Wow.
yeah, so don't like give up on a project too soon. I feel like you can still do like some really significant edits on things. So, but it is hard
Yeah.
to know how.
Yeah. I mean, none of my books look anything like their first drafts at all. The example I always give is my first book, Anne and the French Kiss, is about, it's a romance that takes place in a boarding school in Paris. And the first draft of it, like, it did take place there, but it also involved an art heist And you'll see that nowhere in the book today. There's no such thing at all. So a lot of times that first draft really is just like picking out the stuff that you do like, and then you can take that out and see like, well, how do I put it together in a better way? So yeah, I'm someone who I'm such a slow drafter that I really don't believe in like giving up on things. And some authors are very, very fast drafters, and those are the ones who do give up on things faster. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. But if you've spent a really, really long time on something, and it's not working, um, it's okay to do either. It's okay to step back from it and do something else for a while. And it's also okay to like keep fighting for it and keep retooling that. I don't think there's any one way to do it, but I'm definitely in the same camp as you, where I'm like, I'm not willing to to let go of something. I like to keep working on it and figuring out, what's there. Um, and just in terms of piggybacking on your social media, you being worried maybe you did too much, I would say you did a great amount. Everything I saw was great, but also just like, you never know until you're doing something, like what's the right amount of something for you. And it's another one of those things where we all have our own limits, and it's okay if they're very, very different from another author's. And some authors are really, really good at social media, and others are really bad at it, and most of us are somewhere in between, and all of those things are okay. And we so much of the early years of being published, I think, I personally spent a lot of time like comparing myself to how other people were doing it. And the nice thing is that the longer you're in the game, the less you start doing that, because you realize um, like it kind of doesn't matter in a way. Like, yeah, it's nice to be there, and maybe you can get a few extra book sales by doing this or that online. But in general, the biggest boost is always going to come from your publisher, and you either have that support or you don't. And a lot of luck is involved there, right place, right time. So the thing that I always come back to is like, what's the part of the process that I have control over? And that's the book itself and the writing itself. And anytime I start feeling overwhelmed by all the other stuff, I do like refocus, like eyes on my own page, like this is what I can do. I can work on the next book. But it is really hard, you were saying, finding that balance between the publicity and the writing. And that is one thing that for me, I know some authors who are really good at balancing it. I can't. Like, I just can't. And when all the publicity train starts, I just have to stop writing, and all of my attention goes to the other thing for a few months. And it's been a bit of a bummer my whole career. I really wish that I could always be writing. But I can't. I don't have that within me. And so if you find that balance, that's great. Let me know how you found it. Give me some tips. And if you don't, like, that's okay too, because it really is like all of a sudden you have a second job.
Yeah.
And it's so time consuming and lots of energy. So like, give yourself that grace of like, you're doing awesome. And like, yeah, each thing you do, you learn a little bit more about what you can and can't do, what you're willing to do, what you aren't. So to bring things back to something much, much, much sweeter, I would love to know what love stories have really influenced you over your life, because this is like such an extraordinarily like swoony over the top thing. First thing, actually, before you even get into that, I want to compliment you on something we talked about beforehand, where this book does a pretty extraordinary thing where the love interests, both protagonists, are on the page together for almost the entire book, which is a really fun thing for a reader who wants that love story front and center. And it's really hard to do as a writer. So I would love for you to talk about that a little bit, the challenges and pleasures of writing something so intensely focused on these two people.
Yeah, like that is actually one of the things that I went into this in the very earliest stages. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to just have two characters. And I wanted to get to see this like blooming relationship in this really like really zoomed in way. So that was definitely like intentional. And I thought in a way, I was like, this will be easy. Like this is kind of like cutting corners in writing, but it actually turned out to be incredibly hard. And all of the parts, like the pieces that make us human, like our family and friends and daily life and stuff, that all had to still be there for these two people. Otherwise they wouldn't have felt real. So then I had to figure out how to like build all of that and convey it to a reader in an unconventional way. I couldn't just have them go have a scene with their best friend and talk about how they were feeling. So yeah, it ended up being a bit harder than I thought, but I stuck with it, and I am really pleased that, like, you know, it is just them, and it does really like give you all the swoons.
It does. It's really intense because it's right there in front of the reader the whole time. Is that something you're purposefully, like, you tried to put in your second book, or did you give yourself a new challenge, or was doing it again in a different way the challenge?
Yeah. So the next book definitely has a whole cast of characters, but I will say I have not used them to their fullest potential yet, and that is one of the things I'm going to try to work on in the edit, because it did come across, I think I must have just been in the habit, it did really come across 90%, you know, the two main characters again. So I need to work on bringing out all of the little side scenes and subplots and stuff.
Well, I don't think you will have any problem with that in the rewrites, because there are lots of other, you know, I keep talking about like these two characters, but there is this entire world around them and their families and their friends. And they also feel very, very present and on their mind, even when those people aren't there. And I thought that you did a really nice job with that. I think that is a very difficult thing to do, when you don't have a person on the page and you're not actually meeting them, for them to still feel like they have an influence on the story and how that person is thinking. And you definitely had that there the whole time. They felt like, you know, your characters definitely had this full world behind them and all of these people. Um, yeah. Okay. So, did you, if you know, you said you knew you always wanted to be a writer, did you know that you wanted to do love stories? Or was it a surprise to you that this book came out first?
Definitely not a surprise. No. I have like always just latched onto anything with a romance plot. You know, I think it probably started when I was very small and I like saw the kiss scene in One Fine Day movie.
Yes. Oh, it's been a while since I thought about that. The George Clooney, Michelle Pfeiffer, that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, that one. So that was like the first time I'd ever seen a TV kiss, and like my initial reaction was to be like, ew, gross. But then I was like, wait, it's not gross. And then from there, like, let's see, one of my favorite novels as like a teenager was Tamara Pierce's series, Alana, and stuff. And we talked about this the other day.
We did, yeah.
I actually talked about it with Jennifer Lynn Barnes the other day, and that's like one of her favorites. So we were like squealing about it. And that has like a very strong romantic kind of element that like put it on the page in a way that I had not seen before, and was like, this is like what I want to write. So yeah, I think it's always been very focused on romance for me personally.
And what are some, so you mentioned the movie romance, what are some book love stories that have really influenced you over the years? Like, if for all of the Malaprops readers watching this, what book recommendations would you love to give to them?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, Anna and the French Kiss, obviously, but
Stop
also
it.
like,
Thank you.
you know, my favorite. I think Lola is my favorite, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me so happy to hear. I love when people say that Lola's their favorite. Like, I immediately know what kind of person you are when you say that. And I love that kind of person. Thank you. Thank you.
I feel like I'm like more of an Isla, but I love Lola more. Like
I
that's
am
my
also more of an Isla, and I love Lola more.
favorite.
Yay. Thanks.
Yeah. Other ones like Nick and Nora's Ultimate Playlist. Yeah, amazing. I read, I must confess, I read like a lot of paperback romances,
Yeah,
probably
that's
when I was
awesome.
far too young to be reading them, but
I
I
think
did it.
I think we all have that in common. Yes.
So like, it's really hard with those because I read so many, like I don't even think I could like pick out a title or an author. That's really horrible of me to say, but like, I just read so many and just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they fill a need for sure. They're just so yeah, bless those authors for being able to write quickly, right? Like if you find an author you like, you can just like barrel through
Mhm.
that whole catalog. How
Mhm.
long did it take you to write this book? Are you a fast writer, drafter, slow? Do I need to, will I love you or hate you?
I am slow. I am slow.
Yes.
Um,
I'm really slow. I'm very,
like
very,
some
very slow.
people are like, they can do NaNoWriMo and write something in a month. And I'm like, what? I was really pushing it when I wrote this first draft in 5 months. Like that was really like
Oh,
pushing my limit of like, you know, um,
that's impressive.
I was like, I am gonna try this. We're gonna see how it goes. But the first, like you and me, obviously, it went through like a lot of, you know, choppier stages, I guess, because I didn't, have any deadlines. I didn't have anybody, wanting anything from me with it. So like the very first draft of that probably took like a year, but
Yeah.
it wasn't totally, nose to the grindstone all the time. But yeah, so we'll see how it goes moving forward. I'm still like finding my balance there too.
Yeah, I think that's great. And there's definitely new challenges when like, as we talked about earlier, having like the second career now of being like the public persona and the publicity that goes with that. Um, it adds new wrinkles and challenges when you're still trying to figure out like who you are on the other part too.
Yeah.
But I think that's always kind of um, if you can look at it in the way of it being kind of a fun part too, and it's okay to like keep changing when something doesn't work, try something else, or like I don't think there's any one right way to do anything. um yeah, no, that's awesome. um I'm looking through I've got like I've got some notes and it's all, I have such bad handwriting, guys. It's chicken scratch. Oh, just a really random question, just totally personal that I'm very curious about. So Leo, the rocker in your book, he's into like 80s glam metal. Is that what your husband plays as well? Like it's such a specific thing to be into. And I'm like, is that her passion, her husband's passion, both of their passion, or just like a fun thing? You're like, that's really bright and sparkly and weird and would be good against like an empty, like apocalyptic background. Like what was it, the contrast?
He's listening from the other room and he's gonna be really mad at me for even talking for talking about this. But yeah, so he was in a band when he was younger and they did play like some stuff kind of in that flavor. And his favorite bands are Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue. And I love them too. Like I listened to that growing up, like my dad would play that stuff. And for a long time I kind of didn't listen to it. And then I got to a certain age and I was like, wait, what were those songs that I like remember from my childhood? And then like now maybe because I've been drafting this book, I like chose that for him. And then I've been listening to that quite a lot for the past 2 or 3 years, just to, really get in Leo's headspace. And like, it
Mhm.
really kind of made him a very larger than life character.
That's
He's
fun.
nothing like,
Well,
he's nothing like my husband. Don't worry.
I am also married to a musician who, like, when he was younger, like, he loved all of those musicians and he's seen most of them in concert. And it wasn't like I was more on like the poppy 80s side back then. And I've also since gotten to appreciate it a little more like through that funnel. But it was just really fun. I don't think I've ever read a young adult book where like that was in the subplot and it made it really fun. That he's like, okay, hold on, pause while I go put on this like skin tight bodysuit and like mess my hair huge and like put on the eye makeup. It was just a really fun image. It was also a good trick that you made me fall in love with someone who looks like that.
Yeah, he's like a little bit more toned down than they were in those days. And like, you know, I've always loved a guy in eyeliner, and
Oh yeah.
that hasn't faded. So
No, he was a really fun character, and it was fun to see him against, like, the ballerina, with her like super tight bun, and my sister is a ballerina,
oh, cool.
so I always like reading about them. And you got the feet right. Ballerina have crazy feet.
True.
Yeah, now I'm like random. Are there any, wait, what are we doing? How are we doing on time? We're doing great on time. Do we have any questions, or shall I keep like going? I can keep going.
We actually do have some audience
Oh, great.
questions. So yeah, if you're okay to switch to those, and then if we still have some time, we can go back to more of your questions, because
Yeah, of
we're
course.
loving your questions. So thank you both so much for the great conversation. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it. And we do have some wonderful audience questions. I'm actually going to start with one that just came in. That's for you, Stephanie, because someone is just asking for you to also share your favorite romantic books.
Oh.
Since we got recommendations from Brianna. Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice. Like, it's funny. I don't know how many times in my career I've been asked this, and every single time it's thrown at me, I freeze up and I'm like, what do I like? What have I read?
It's always a lot, especially if you read books. Like, yeah, that's a lot.
Right. I mentioned this really early on in our interview, when I compared your book to If I Stay by Gail Forman. But I'm a huge Gail Forman fan. I think her writing is just exquisite, and the emotion and power and drive. And like, I'm a person who cries at just about everything, but rarely books for some reason. But her books always get me. I've cried on many airplanes reading her books, and same with Rainbow Rowell. I think like if there's any writer who I could like take her talent from, it would be Rainbow. I love her work so much. I think they're all good, but my favorite is still her first book, Landline, which I feel like a lot of people haven't read because it was released maybe about a year or half a year before Eleanor and Park was, which is what blew up her career. And Landline was an adult novel that she did, and it's told, about half of the book is told in email. And it's this guy who's been hired to read. It takes place in the 90s at a newspaper in Omaha, which Rainbow worked at. And this guy's been hired to like check their email to make sure they're not like saying anything they shouldn't be saying. And then he ends up falling in love with someone through her letters with her best friend. And it's really, really, really cute and well done. And I've read it so many times. I think it's just a perfect book that I would recommend to anyone who likes a love story. Yeah, those are my picks off the top of my head. There's so many.
That's great. That's certainly, between the two of you, that's certainly a great start for folks if they're looking for some inspiration, for things to add to their to be read pile.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, like I said, we have some other great questions. We'll start with one from Roanne, who asks, what was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Wow. That is an intensely good question.
That is an intensely good question, Roanne. Thank you. And I'll just let whoever comes up with an intensely good answer first be the first.
Stephanie, do you have an answer?
You know what?
Like,
I like what you did there. Yeah, playing for time by putting it back on the bookseller.
But really,
I like what you did. No, but I did. I thought it. I have been thinking about it, and it's really interesting because I feel like that is very much tied up with memory in a way that's hard to pull apart, if that makes sense, right? Because I do have a sense that I was actually pretty young when it occurred to me that words mattered, right? And that like how somebody put words together and how they spoke and how they were written, like had all of this, could have all of this sort of extra meaning,
Yeah.
And I'm not a writer. I have a lot of respect for writers. There are lots of booksellers who are amazing writers. I'm not one of those people. I've written the odd story here, there, whatever, but that's, but I feel like I feel like when starting at a pretty young age, I was always a reader, and I feel like I did start to listen to people pretty closely.
Yeah.
And so, and I was an overly sensitive kid. And so, like, people could say things that I would then potentially read too much into, right, and feel bad about. And that was one of the things that sort of drove home. And I think one of the reasons why I liked reading books as well, because that was one of the things that, like, when you think about it, that meant that, like, words really mattered a lot to me, and maybe sometimes more than they did to other people, right? So there was all this power when somebody might throw away a phrase and not have any idea how it lands on you.
Yeah.
And that's true in so many ways, right? And why I, as a grown person, feel it's so important to be thoughtful about what we say and how we interact with people, because you really don't know how you're making another person feel, and I think that matters, right? So so this turned into the bookseller hour. Sorry, y'all.
No, I love that answer so much. That's a really good answer. Brianna, how about you?
Yeah, I think similarly, like it's such a gradual process, and it probably, the very first time you realize it, you're probably so young that you're not really aware of it, but it just builds and builds until, like, you become an adult and, like, you're aware of all of the undercurrents of everything. So yeah. And
I guess Roanne's question is really, like, what was an early experience? I didn't name a specific experience because I feel like there were just a lot of them.
Yeah, right.
But if you do have a thought about a particular thing, feel free to share it. But it might be, that's just a really deep question. So.
It is a deep question with, like, a lot of unpacking. Also, and it ties into, like, stories specifically, and how certain brains are really, really wired to respond to story and storytelling, and how really all human brains are, but some even more than others. And I just read a really fabulous book for writers called Wired for Story by Lisa Cron, Cron, and which is all about the brain science of storytelling, and how the more you know about how that works, the better, writers can use it to manipulate their audience. But I love your answer about, like, I feel like I learned the power of words more from interacting with other people and, like, recognizing the power of what they said. But in terms of writing, the thing that always jumps out at me was that Roald Dahl was the first author that I recognized as an author. Like, when my mom was reading me stories as a kid, that was the first time where, like, I heard the voice and was like, oh, that's someone making specific choices, and nobody sounds like that author, and there's a person there doing that, and I want more from that person. So that was a really powerful experience for me in terms of language.
That's a great answer. And I'm actually going to add one more thing, since you gave me the floor a minute ago, which was, and I don't remember how old I was, may have still been elementary school, but maybe it was middle school. I do have a particular recollection around reading Lucille Clifton poetry, and around feeling sort of seen in a way that I had not up until that point. And being, and sort of recognizing that people could, that poetry could not only be the sort of thing that it was in, that it's usually presented to be in school, that isn't very accessible, right? To a certain, and it could be something else entirely. That was also beautiful and funny and accessible and visceral, and, like, I felt reflected in. Shout out to Lucille Clifton, y'all. Just want to be clear.
I love that. I remember feeling seen. It's such a, like, very typical answer for someone who writes what I write, I think. But I was in college when The Princess Diaries came out, and I don't even know how it got into my hands, but because young adult didn't exist when I was a teenager, and much of a way at all. I missed it. I skipped straight from children's books to adult books. And then here was this really, really like geeky protagonist who was in love with a nerdy boy. And I was like, oh, well, I'm that. And that was powerful, like seeing this protagonist who wasn't cool. So Brianna, what was that book for you where like you saw yourself in it? What was that first book for you?
Yeah. Probably those Tamara Pierce ones, but her second series, like it's a girl who can talk to animals, which I can't really do, but something about that character was just like, I was the same, there wasn't a lot of YA when I was an actual teenager. So yeah, it was kind of sparse back then.
It was.
Let me go with that.
I love that.
Excellent. So we've got a question from Brandy. This is a good one for aspiring writers and maybe a tough one for y'all. We'll see. What do you do to get through writer's block?
So I just kind of put myself in front of the computer. Like I sometimes will be really bad about trying to like avoid writing, but like once I get there and sit down and tell myself like you're going to be here for the next 3 to 4 hours, something usually comes. Like sometimes I have to throw it all out, but yeah, just actually putting yourself in the place where you write, and then just sitting there. I don't know.
So I have another book recommendation. It's called Around the Writer's Block. I forgot the author's name, but that is definitely the title, Around the Writer's Block.
Sure, we'll look it up. Yeah,
it is phenomenal. It's another one that looks at it from a brain science perspective. I really like this new trend of like looking at the brain science behind storytelling. And for a long time, I kind of didn't believe that writer's block was a real thing. And I was one of those authors who would kind of poo-poo it, like, oh, like plumbers don't get plumber's block. But I think I was just like thinking of it in the wrong way. And like, it's just about getting stuck. And a lot of it's about fear. It's very fear-based and procrastination-based, which is also based in fear. And this book, which I read it just a couple weeks ago, and it blew my mind like wide open. And for anyone who struggles with writing, I can't recommend it highly enough. Like I can't, it's way too much to go into here. So I hope you pick it up, but it very clearly goes through all of the different stages and different ways where you can kind of attack and adjust that in your own schedule. And like, it was a life-changing book for me. So I really, really encourage anyone who's struggling a little bit, and whether you recognize it as that or not, you could just be like, oh, I procrastinate all the time, or I get really distracted, or I'm so afraid. Those are all symptoms of writer's block.
Excellent. That actually answers another question. Allie, who asked about your favorite romantic books, also just added a question asking if you had any other favorite writing books to recommend. So
there we go. Wired for story around the writer's block. If it's the Allie I'm thinking about, I think we just talked about this book the other day. So
and then Brianna, if you have another, it looks like Brianna's going to grab a book, which is awesome.
Yes.
So you were talking about Lisa Cronin. She also wrote Story Genius, which is like, this was what blew my mind wide open. And yeah, it goes really deeply into like what your characters want, and like what their misbelief is about the world that they're going to have to conquer over the course of the novel. And I used that when I was rewriting You and Me at the End of the World, and it like it just made the characters so much more layered. And then right now I'm also using Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
Save the Cat's come up a few times during our events. So yeah,
it's a really solid book.
So thank you.
Yay! I'm gonna have to read her other book now.
It's 4 o'clock, but we started a couple minutes late, and I know if folks are on and they need to head off, we totally understand that. But Brianna and Stephanie, if you don't mind staying for a minute for another question, there's another. I think in the end we may still not get to everything, but there's another really good one that I wanted to.
fabulous.
throw out.
I'll like
Yeah.
stay for another hour. You guys are so amazing.
Thank you. Brandy had another question, which was, do you think it's important for someone to have actually experienced love before writing about it? And how much of your stories do you base off of your actual experience? And y'all had a little conversation earlier about, you know, real life versus the fiction, but that question about love specifically, especially for, you know, readers and writers of romance, feels like a great question. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I do draw like from you know, personal, like just micro experiences, I guess. Yeah, because Hannah and Leah's story is very different than like my own love stories. But like I can kind of reference those little bits. But I mean, I think people can get that from other media as well. Like you can fall in love with a fictional character or somebody on TV. So like all of that is going in and informing like what your view of romance is. So I think, you know, just start whenever, and your ideas of love will change over time, and so will your writing of it. Yeah.
I think so too. And if you haven't had romantic love before, but you want to write about it, if you've had like a really close friendship, there's actually a lot in common. Like I always like when I'm talking to friends or whatever about my husband, you know, it's like I always say like, oh, it's like our friendship plus kissing. Like my husband is my best friend. We're really, really close, but then like there's this extra layer on top of it, which is awesome. But like my relationship with him is like very deeply friendship based. He's my like best friend in the whole wide world. So I think there's so much you can learn from really close friendships as well, because you know, I had those really intense like breakups like with friends as a teenager, that were like deeply scarring and painful, and that I still think about and have influenced how I act in other friendships. And I think that, like it's very similar to a breakup in, you know, a romantic relationship. So there even if you haven't had the romantic relationship, there's probably something else in your life that has had some tension, and the like really good, amazing, we're having such a great time together, and also like the pitfalls of that too, and where it can get tricky, so you can pull from that as well.
Those are both great answers. And I'll say to you that I always really love books that have interesting and intense non-romantic relationships. You know, that have, and there may be romantic relationship, but there are platonic relationships that you know, sometimes platonic relationships can just feel like sort of plot serving kind of throwaway sorts of things, where they're just introducing characters to introduce them, and it feels a lot of times like there's an opportunity lost there to really explore, you know, relationships that are often just as impactful, if not more so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Romantic relationships. And so that does, so I appreciate that answer, because, you know, and love the romance too, right? Because that, but, you know, but recognizing that and having that as a place to start.
Yeah. And I think piggybacking off of that too, you know, when I write a book, I try to remember that every single character that's in the book, from, you know, the protagonist to this person who just kind of walks through in the background, they're each the lead of their own story, and everyone has stuff going on. Everyone has problems and hopes and dreams and wishes and fears. And the more of that you can include, the more complicated those people get, the richer the main story gets too. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's always helpful to play those stories against each other. You know, that's like intermediate level writing is when you learn that all those B plots, you know, need to be saying something about the A plot too. So, yeah.
That's a great point. So, okay, so this will be our last question, and it's from Marianne, who asked us the awesome question about language, the power of language. And it's a nice segue from what we were just talking about with characters, and it's fun. How do you select the names of your characters?
Oh, very fun. You can go first.
I love naming my characters. I do not have children. I'm not going to have children, and I love to name things. So it's like my chance in life to get to name a lot of things. And I have a really difficult time writing a story if I haven't locked down the names yet. Some authors I know can like fill in like character X and then like tell the story. But my names always, to me, are just such an integral part of who they are and where their story is going to go. And so it's something I do give a lot of thought to, and I collect names. I have a notebook in my desk, and whenever I run across a fun name, I jot it down. I watch movie credits because I'm also like a big film nerd, and I love the credits too. And I pull names directly out of film. In fact, the protagonist of my second book, Lola Nolan, her last name was named after Christopher Nolan, and it was before he was like a big deal, because I actually started writing that book 10 years before my first book. Like, it's technically my oldest book. And I just liked how silly it sounded together. But so like I do pull names from all over the place, and I keep a notebook, and it's fun. It's like a little job for me, a little hobby.
I'm kind of similar, actually. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just asking I was just going over to you, to your answer. Sorry, we just talked over each other.
Yeah, I'm really similar. I have like a document where I collect names as well. And I've always been a names girl. Like, I think I had like a baby name book when I was like 13, but not to name children. Like, I just got it for like little bits of writing and stuff. And I would highlight all the names I loved. So yeah, I've always been looking at names, and credits are a great place for names. Like, you watch a movie and you think you've heard every name that could possibly exist, and then you see a credit and you're like, wow, that's an amazing name, and how have I never heard it before?
Yes.
So definitely, yeah, baby name book, good place.
Yeah, baby names, cemeteries, credits, phone books. They're harder and harder to come by. But if you're in a hotel, there's a good chance there's a phone book in your room.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And like Hannah was like, it was meant to be just like a placeholder name. And then I got to a point in the story where I was like, I can never change her name. This is her. Like, they really, take on that name, and that becomes them in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. That's we'll end. We've had some wonderful writing advice throughout, and we'll end on that piece of advice. It's been lovely to spend an hour with the two of you. Brianna, congratulations again.
Thank you.
On the book, on the debut novel. We're so pleased for you. I want to encourage again everyone to go out and get a copy from your local indie, from us, or your local indie if it's elsewhere. And we know some people are joining us from around the world today. So we encourage you to shop in your local bookstores also. And Stephanie, thank you as always.
Oh, thanks. If I could do a quick plug for
yes, please do. Yes. That was going to be my next.
Next month with Malaprops. My buddy Jeff Zettner and I, we've been pals now for like 15 years, but way before either of us was ever published. This is his fourth book. It's beautiful. We're going to be talking about it with Malaprops next month. And then a couple weeks after that, my next book releases. It'll be August 31st. I will be doing a Malaprop solo event. The book is called The Woods Are Always Watching. It is another creepy book like my previous book, There's Someone Inside Your House. It's not connected though. It's one that takes place in my neck of the woods. It takes place around Asheville. My girls live in Asheville, and it's the Pisgah National Forest, which is our forest. And they go out, two girls go on a backpacking trip to help save like their crumbling friendship. And they run into some really, really, really bad, scary stuff. And I can't say too much about it. But you've got like all the nature survivalist kind of horror in there. And then you've also got a very real like human horror element to it as well. It's not a supernatural book. It's another like human, true crimey type horror. So that's fun. I'm excited. There's a pre-order link like on my Instagram page to Malaprops. So I'll sign and personalize everything. So I've got those two events. And then on top of it, this is going to be a Netflix movie very, very soon. I'm not allowed to say when, but it is very, very soon, you guys.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so
It's
excited.
amazing.
It's gonna be
Like
so
I
cool.
saw it and it's really good. I can't say anything more than that, and I'm dying to, but like I was really nervous, and I'm now that I've seen it, I'm so proud of it and excited for people to see it. So keep an eye on Netflix, and if you want that book, or my really cool collector's edition of Anne and the French Kiss that has these like beautiful
Pretty.
end pages and stuff, all of that can be I sign and personalized through Malaprops. They're my hometown booksellers. I love them to pieces. So get Brianna's book, get mine, get someone else's, support them, you guys. I really, really hope that you'll throw a couple bucks their way today for putting on this event.
And you can get tattoos.
Yeah. Oh, there they are.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Thank you for showing that. Yeah. Yeah. When you get, I think I mentioned it briefly before, but when you order Brianna's book from us, there's a temporary tattoo set, signed book plate, and there's a special Spotify playlist. There's a little card that you get that has a Spotify playlist. So we encourage you to do that. And Stephanie, thank you, and congratulations on all of this stuff and the upcoming books. We hope we'll see some of you, all of you perhaps, at some upcoming events with other great authors, including Stephanie Perkins and Jeff Zentner coming up next in August, and then Stephanie again in August with her new book. And Brianna, I'll just say now, I hope we see you again as well.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And thank you for everyone who's come to help celebrate this, because it has been weird, but I wouldn't have got to do this event with you guys if it had not been the pandemic. So.
Exactly. It's a long flight. So we're really delighted that we were able to do this. Thank you both again so much. And thanks again to everybody who's been with us today. We look forward to seeing you again, and happy reading in the meantime.